Music hold ended.
Good evening, Utah, and welcome to Senator Lee's Tele-townhall. We're excited to have everyone on the discussion tonight. If you're joining us on the phone, please press *3 if you'd like to ask a question to Senator Lee, and if you're online, use the hashtag #LeeTownhall. Senator, you've been hosting these Tele-townhalls nearly every month for the past 5 years, and usually we invite people from across the state of Utah to participate. In fact, it's not uncommon for tens of thousands of Utahns to tune into your town hall forums each month. But recently, you decided to take a different approach and tailor these town hall forums to specific regions within the state of Utah. For instance, tonight we'll be fielding questions from just Iron and Beaver County. Why did you decide to do this?
Well, thanks, Linda, and thanks to all of you for joining us this evening. It's an honor to represent you in Washington. It's an honor to have you participating in this call tonight. At the outset, let me just note my voice is not what it should be. I've come down with a cold in the last couple of days, and I'm a little bit hoarse, so I hope everybody can hear me and understand me okay. I have, for the last 5 years, ever since I've been a senator, I've done town hall meetings on a regular basis, in person. That continues. At the same time, I also added these tele-town halls as a way to supplement those so that I can visit even more often with Utah constituents. Even when I'm here in Washington, I can do town halls this way. We reach a lot of people this way, and Linda, as you pointed out, sometimes tens of thousands of people at a time. Both of those types of town halls will continue. The in-person town halls that I do throughout the state, and also the statewide tele-town halls. But this is a new type of event that I've started doing just recently, where we'll do regional tele-town halls. This allows me to discuss on a region-by-region basis the concerns that people have in different parts of our state. You know, I've found that a rancher in Beaver County or Iron County might have a different set of concerns than a single parent in Salt Lake. And their interaction with the federal government might be different. So that's why this is a good opportunity for me to have a dialogue with the people I represent back in Utah, and I thank you for joining us this evening.
All right, and if you're on the phone and joining us tonight and would like to ask a question to Senator Lee, go ahead and press *3, and if you're online, use the hashtag #LeeTownhall. We're excited to have County Commissioner Tammy Pearson from Beaver County on the line with us, and she has a question about federal agencies. Commissioner Pearson, you're on the line with Senator Lee.
Hello, Commissioner.
Thank you. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you very much, Commissioner Pearson.
We appreciate the time with you. I met you in Washington, D.C. in November, and we came out to discuss some problems that we were having with federal agencies in our county and in Utah in general.
That's right. I remember that well. That was the day when one of the male commissioners that was there almost accidentally walked into the ladies' room, and I stopped him at the last minute.
And you saved him.
That's
yes.
right.
What my question then, you know, and basically our concern right now, and as you know, and I'm sure you're well aware of the powder keg that's going on as far as federal agencies go, and not only Nevada and Oregon, but also in Utah. We're really concerned for the fact that the agencies seem to have their own interpretation of what federal policies are, and we definitely disagree with some of those things, and we're wondering what we can do as a county organization or county government, what we can do to help with that.
Well, Commissioner, first of all, thank you for your call and for your question, your concern. This is a consistent one. It's a question that comes up in one form or another, from one end of the state to the other. What we've seen in recent decades is a shift of policy-making authority away from Congress and toward executive branch agencies. And this has happened in a way that disempowers the people, so that the heads of executive branch bureaucracies are now almost untouchable. They're not elected by the people. They don't serve at the pleasure of the people. They can't be voted out of office. This doesn't mean that they're bad people. It just means that they produce bad government. You see, because bad things happen when you put the same power to make the laws in the hands of the very people who are enforcing those laws. The very first article, the first clause, the first section of the Constitution says all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives. And we have openly flouted that provision. We have disregarded it. We've allowed Congress to make, in effect, czars out of these executive branch agency heads. Now, these are good people. Many of them, they're hardworking, well-educated, well-intentioned, and often very highly specialized men and women. But they don't work for you. And so what we have to do is we have to re-empower the people by re-empowering the Congress. And specifically what I mean by that is when an executive branch agency makes a new rule that will have a major impact on the American economy, that needs to go through Congress. It needs to be passed into law by Congress and signed into law by the President so that you can hold your elected representatives accountable. This is why I support initiatives like the REINS Act, of which I'm an original co-sponsor in the Senate, which would require all these things to go through Congress. It's also one of the reasons why I've started something called the Article 1 Project. It's designed to deal with this very problem that you've described, to reclaim the powers of Congress, to make sure that they're exercised by Congress rather than executive branch bureaucrats. We'll get there little by little, but we need your help. We need your help in spreading the word, in helping people understand the nature of the problem, and that's where we're going with this.
Okay, we still got a number of you joining the call with us tonight. If you're on the phone and would like to ask a question to Senator Lee, go ahead and press *3. And if you're online, use the hashtag #LeeTownhall. We're going to go to Cedar City next, where Julie has a question about breaking liberal policies. Julie, you're on the line with Senator Lee.
Lee?
Hello.
I watch the news constantly, and I am so discouraged with all the things that are going on in Washington. We put in a Republican Congress. We have a Republican House. Nothing seems to change. The health care is not changed. Kate Steinle, it wasn't passed. I know there were things that, but it was not voted on, and I do not understand that. And they said there were Republicans who actually voted against it. I get things wanting me to support the candidates and support the Republican Party, but I'm tired of the establishment sticking their nose in, and yet I'm afraid what's going to happen. I don't know. Anyway, why can we not get these laws passed?
First of all, I share your concern. It is tremendously frustrating to me, not just as a senator, but also as a citizen, to watch the very dynamics that you've described unfold. The fact that we weren't able to get the Kate Steinle provision that you mentioned, the fact that we were fortunately able to pass an Obamacare repeal bill, and I was instrumental in moving that forward and making sure that we repealed as much of Obamacare, virtually all of it, as we could under the Senate rules with a simple majority vote. We got it past the House and got it past the Senate, and then President Obama vetoed it. We don't have enough votes to override his veto at that point, and so that's why that one happened. But there are other measures that you referred to that we should have been able to pass and at least get them to the President's desk. It's unfortunate when some Republicans choose not to adhere to the basic tenets of the Republican Party and to stick to the conservative message. That's one of the reasons why our job as conservatives, those of us who share this belief about what the purpose of government is, we need to explain to the American people why this is so important. We need more conservatives, not just more people of one political party or another, but more conservatives, more people dedicated to the proposition that the powers of the federal government are limited and that we've drifted far from the Constitution's meaning and structure. We've drifted far from the two structural protections put in place by the Constitution. The vertical power, the vertical protection that we call federalism, that tells us that most powers of government are to be exercised at the state and the local level. And the horizontal protection that tells us that our laws are to be passed by Congress, they're to be implemented by the executive branch. They're to be interpreted by the judicial branch. And we've drifted so far from these. We need to explain to the American people why we all suffer to the degree that we depart from those structural constitutional protections. As we do so, I'm confident that we'll gain more allies in this effort, and that we will get to a point where we can pass real meaningful health care reform, starting with the complete repeal of Obamacare as soon as we're able to get a president who will sign it into law, and concluding with significant reforms that need to be made to our criminal justice system, to our immigration code, and you've identified many of these. I wish I had an easy answer for you to tell you why it is that we can't change everything right now, or to tell you how soon we will be able to. I don't know the answers to those questions, and I'd be misleading you if I told you that I know exactly how it's going to end, or that there is an easy path to get there. I know only this, that if we don't fight, if we don't try, then we will be stuck with more of the same. I share your commitment, not just your frustration, but also your commitment to make sure that we get more of what we deserve as citizens, that we shouldn't have to settle for trillion-dollar deficits. We shouldn't have to settle for a government that projects overbearance at home and weakness abroad. We should expect and demand more. We should expect and demand a federal government that will respect limits on its own power, respect your right as a United States citizen to live in a country where the government will limit its own power and will restrain its own power according to the dictates of the Constitution. Little by little, if we work together, we can get there. But thank you for your concern and for your question.
Okay, and just a reminder, if you're joining the call by phone and would like to ask a question to Senator Lee, please press *3. And if you're online, use the hashtag #LeeTownhall. Senator, as we're waiting for more people to join the call, either phone or online, let's go ahead and take a question that was recently asked at one of your mobile office visits. For those of you who have never heard of Senator Lee's mobile office, this is when a member of Senator Lee's staff spends the day in a local community visiting with constituents, fielding questions, and initiating casework. Recently, Betty Ariel, who is your Southern Utah State Director, held mobile office hours in Beaver and Iron County, and she collected several questions from constituents who came by to visit. One of these questions is from Scott, and he asks, what can Congress do to provide relief from Obamacare?
Okay, Scott. Obamacare is a law that was put forward before Congress. This was a 2,700-page bill. Members of Congress were asked to vote for it without even knowing what was in it. As then Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, infamously stated, you have to pass this law to find out what's in it. This is no way to run a legislative operation. It certainly is no way to overhaul our nation's healthcare system. Buried within that law were all kinds of special interest carve-outs, all kinds of things that did a lot to empower government bureaucrats in Washington while doing little or nothing to make healthcare more accessible or more affordable for the American people. Significantly, Obamacare has never enjoyed the support of a majority of the American people. Its reputation has not improved with time, nor has it become more popular as it has been implemented. If anything, Americans are realizing that this is in many ways compounding the problem. This is why I fought so hard just a few months ago to make sure that we used what's known as the Senate budget reconciliation process to pass a full repeal of Obamacare. We knew that we needed to do this and to put it on the president's desk, even though we knew that President Obama was not likely to sign it. We knew that it was important nonetheless to go through the exercise and to put it on his desk. Because this law that has never enjoyed the support of a majority of the American people, that has made health care less affordable and less accessible for the American people, this law that has taken health care decision-making power away from doctors and patients and put it in the hands of government bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. If the president wants the American people to be stuck with this law that has caused so much job loss, that has caused so much turmoil in the healthcare industry, if he wants that law to remain intact, then he needs to look the American people in the eye and tell them why he's vetoing it. Now, he did veto it. At this point, we don't have the votes to override his veto. I do, however, look forward to the day, Scott, when we can have a president who will sign that same legislation into law. And Scott, let me just say another thing regarding healthcare reform. What we need to be aiming for is not just the pre-Obamacare status quo. That wasn't perfect. Obamacare, to be sure, has made things worse. But we can do better even than the pre-Obamacare status quo. You see, a lot of what makes healthcare too expensive is the fact that we have gotten rid of the free market forces in our economy as they relate to healthcare. It's free market forces and competition that improve quality and keep cost reasonable, that can actually lead to efficiencies that can reduce the ultimate price tag for the healthcare consumer. If we can harness the power of the free market, we will see the day when healthcare costs start coming down again. We do see this in some areas where certain elective procedures tend to be paid for with cash. In those areas, you tend to see healthcare costs going down rather than up. In almost every other area of healthcare, you see healthcare costs going up because the government has interfered with and in some cases almost systematically dismantled the free market forces that could otherwise make healthcare more accessible and more affordable for more Americans. You know, the time will come when all of those who agree with me that we need to repeal Obamacare, that we'll have to unite behind a single Obamacare replacement plan. Right now, however, we don't need one single bill, we need a dozen. Some of them have been developed already, others are in the pipeline. But we need those to compete in the marketplace of ideas so that we can eventually solidify and unite behind a single Obamacare replacement plan, the one that will put doctors and patients back in charge of making healthcare decisions and taking that decision-making power away from government bureaucrats in Washington who have no business making those decisions for you or your family.
All right, for those of you still joining the call and would like to ask a question to Senator Lee, if you're on the phone, please press *3, and if you're online, use the hashtag #LeeTownhall. We're going to go ahead and do another mobile office question. This one is from Shirley, and she asks, there are prairie dogs on the highway and destroying plants in the cemeteries. What can be done to protect Utah communities from the Endangered Species Act?
Hello, Shirley. First of all, I share your concern with the Utah prairie dog. This has long been of concern to me as I've seen people throughout southern Utah, especially in Iron County, deal with the devastating effects of mismanagement of the Endangered Species Act and the manner in which it's enforced. It's one of the reasons why I've introduced legislation in the Senate that would limit the application of the Endangered Species Act to species that actually move interstate, that have some kind of connection to interstate commerce. Remember, Congress doesn't have the power to legislate on any and everything that it deems fit. It's supposed to legislate only on matters that are designated as national issues under the Constitution. The Endangered Species Act was enacted pursuant to Congress's authority under the Commerce Clause, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 of the Constitution, which gives Congress the power to regulate trade, or commerce, as it's referred to in the Constitution, between the states, with foreign nations, and with the Indian tribes. I believe that Congress has no business regulating the management of a species that is neither a commodity nor any type of thing that moves interstate at all. There is, of course, no market, let alone an interstate market for prairie dogs, and prairie dogs don't migrate. This is a Utah problem. It ought to be something that can be dealt with by state and local regulators within the state of Utah, and not by government bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., who come up with these one-size-fits-all standards. If we pass that legislation, we could deal with the prairie dog issue on a state and a local basis, which would be far more respectful of the property interests and the other interests of the people of the state of Utah who actually have to live with this mess. I share your concern, and please know that I'm doing everything I can to fight against this kind of domination by our federal government.
Okay, we have time for one more question, and we're actually going to do one that was submitted by email. Every week, hundreds of Utahns send you emails about their concerns and opinions and ask questions that matter most to them. So last week, you received an email from Justin, and he asked, does the government really need to collect interest on their student loans? What if Congress could find a way to pass legislation that would forbid the collection of interest on all federal student loans?
Okay, Justin, thank you for your question. The first question that I would ask to you in response is, why does the federal government need to be in this business at all? Or if it does need to be in that business, why on earth would we have the federal government occupy the entire field? In legislation passed by Congress a few years ago, Congress essentially made it impossible for anyone other than the federal government to engage in the student loan business. As a result, there's no real competition in this industry. And without competition, the quality of service tends to go down and the price tends to go up. Washington, D.C., in a nutshell, is making money off of this. This is a profit center for them. They borrow money at these artificially low interest rates, given that our Treasury yield rates are at an all-time historic low right now. They borrow at this low rate, then they loan that money to students, and they charge an interest rate several times the interest rate that the federal government's actually paying for it. This has become a revenue source, a profit center, if you will, for the federal government. It's wrong, and this results in higher interest rates than we would otherwise have for students if we allowed the free market to do its thing, if we allowed the free market to participate. And so that's my first layer of response to that. My second response has to do with the underlying cause of the high cost of higher education. It's one thing to deal with the interest rates, but unless you're dealing with the skyrocketing cost of a higher education, you're not really solving the problem. That's why I've introduced the Higher Education Reform Act, which would allow each state the option of creating its own alternative accreditation system, such that you could have more types of higher education providers competing in the marketplace for the higher education experience. There are many providers of higher education, including those who offer massive open online courses, or MOOCs as they're sometimes described, or vocational training programs, professional certifications. Lots of providers of a higher education experience that don't necessarily fit neatly into the traditional brick and mortar higher education learning institution. These alternate providers ought to be given the chance to compete, as should online universities and other sort of non-traditional avenues of a higher education learning experience. If we introduced this legislation into federal law, if we were able to get this bill that I've introduced in the Senate passed, what we would see is we'd have more participants in the marketplace. We'd have more people offering a higher education learning experience. As that happened, there'd be more competition. With more competition, you'd see prices go down, you'd see quality improve. So that's what I'm working on, and I hope that addresses your question.
All right. We want to thank everyone that joined us tonight. Senator, I'm going to go ahead and just turn the time right back over to you to tell the people of Iron and Beaver counties what they can do to stay connected to you and what you're working on.
Great. Thank you very much, Linda, and thanks again to all of you for joining us this evening. It's an honor and a privilege to be able to represent you as your U.S. Senator, and it's something that means a lot to me that you'd be willing to join us. My roots in southern Utah run very deep. My great-great-grandfather, John D. Lee, settled New Harmony, and along with a number of other communities in Utah. He was eventually tried and later executed. His trial took place in Beaver itself for his role in the Mountain Meadows Massacre. John D. Lee, my great-great-grandfather, was, according to some historians, a scapegoat, and one who, according to his own testimony, never actually killed anyone. He was a scapegoat. He was tried and convicted of murder in Beaver. And so each time I go to Beaver, I remember that, and I'm always appreciative of the fact that I'm going to Beaver under very different circumstances than my great-great-grandfather. I'm going to southern Utah again later this week. I'll be doing a town hall meeting at Hurricane High School in Washington County at 1 p.m. on Saturday. This coming Saturday at 1 p.m. at Hurricane High School. I'll also be speaking at some political events in St. George and in Cedar City that day, and so I look forward to that. I want to invite each and every one of you to reach out to me, to my office, anytime we can be of help. I've got a very good staff, both in Utah and in Washington, D.C. A staff consisting of men and women who have a lot of experience dealing with the federal government, dealing with the kinds of problems that Utahns routinely face when interacting with federal agencies. If you're ever having a problem working with a federal agency, whether it's the Social Security Administration, the Veterans Affairs, the Department of Veterans Affairs, or any other federal agency, please let us know and let us know how we can help. You can reach my Salt Lake office at 801-524-5933, or you can reach us in the DC office at 202-224-5444. You can also reach out to us through my website at lee.senate.gov. I want to close on an optimistic note. I believe that while our challenges as a country are great, I remain optimistic about the fact that our best days really are still ahead of us, because I believe in something that Winston Churchill used to say about the American people. He said the American people can always be counted on to do the right thing after they've exhausted every other alternative. I'm not sure Mr. Churchill meant that as a compliment, but I take it as such. You see, because it's what differentiates us from other countries. We're great as Americans, not because of who we are, but because of what we do. Because of the fact that, yeah, while we may make mistakes along the way, we ultimately choose to do the right thing. We've given this big government, this Washington, D.C. centric approach to governing a good long try, a try that's lasted the better part of a century. It hasn't worked. What we're discovering is that what made us great to begin with was adherence to the principles of limited government. It's been the best anti-poverty mechanism ever devised on planet Earth. In recorded history, there has never been a country where so many people who were once poor made their way out of poverty because of the free market system put in place and protected by our Constitution, and because of the great things that free people do when they're allowed to be free. We as Americans continue to embrace these things, and as we continue to do that, we will benefit to a very significant degree. And that's why I'm confident that our best days are ahead of us. I invite all within the sound of my voice to join me in this cause, to reject the status quo. So I'm asking you, when you're told to just accept massive government debt, massive deficits as the new normal, as you're told that you just have to accept certain realities as unchangeable in Washington, reject that. So don't settle. Don't settle for trillion-dollar deficits. Expect Congress to balance its budget. Don't settle for a government that projects overbearance at home and weakness abroad. Expect a government that will vigorously defend you and your rights. Don't settle for a president who wants to make law with a pen and a cell phone. Expect Congress to do its job and to stand up for your right to live in a free republic where laws are made by the consent of the governed. Thank you very much for joining me tonight. I invite you all to join with me in this cause. It's time to expect more. It's time to expect freedom. Thank you very much.